Welcome to this podcast. I have with me Jacey, Prudence, and Adeline. And I know for some of you, this is your first time on the Walnut Women podcast. So thank you for joining me today. And today's topic is a fun one. We're just wanted to talk about the Singles Undivided conference that FCBC hosted at the end of February. And I believe there was roughly 50 to 60 signups, something like that, on the numbers. And the sessions, there were three main sessions within the 2 day conference period, and there were seven breakout workshop sessions. And all of these resources within our conference was hosted by our own church pastor and our own church members, which I think was really exciting. And so this conference is the Singles Conference. I don't know how you felt about this conference, but we're going to talk about it. And the first thing I think I was thinking as I was preparing for this time is that, the singles of our church are really valuable to us. And even Pastor Hanley's recent message, the title was Spent Because We've Been Sent. And I think, like, when I look at you three, I definitely would say you guys have been sent by the church to our student ministries, and you guys are like the spiritual the frontliners of having those interactions with our students, our children, our preschoolers, our youth. And if you're tired and feel spent, like, you're doing God's work, and we're just so thankful for that. So this conference was for you guys, and it was interesting that you couldn't pick up our babies this time and serve as the helpers because you were the ones being served. So let's talk about how your experience at the church's first ever singles conference was. So the first question is just like, how was the conference for you as being an attendee and not a servant? Anyone can go.
I enjoyed the conference, but I have to say it definitely was like a shifting gear in my head to really feel like I was an attendee. Just because I'm so used to always doing like childcare, serving food, something or other. And so I remember there were a couple times where I was telling Jacey, I was like, I just have to go see the babies. I don't know what to do with myself. I just have to go see the babies. And so I would sneak off with Sarah and we would just go into the line classroom where the kids were and just say hi to them for a few minutes. Be like, okay, I feel better now. Okay, now I can go back to the conference and like continue to interact with people. Or when we were picking up food, JC would be like, stop serving people and just get your food. Make sure, let's go sit down and eat. And I was like, oh, okay, sorry, not in the right mindset. But definitely, I really enjoyed the conference. I really enjoyed the direction that it went in. I really appreciate that it wasn't like a just wait for the right one kind of a conference. And it was very much like, how can you make the most of your singleness, and that serving God isn't about whether or not you're single or married. It's about your walk with God and how you are going to live out his plan for you.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, like when your hands have nothing to do, huh? And you're supposed to just rest and enjoy that. That's a part of life, Adeline.
It was weird.
I'm glad that you had your time to just soak and take in and receive. Okay, anybody else?
I think I agree with like the direction of the conference too, where usually like other conferences would be focusing on like dating or like biblical principles or just biblical manhood, womanhood, and those topics. But this one was more so like, in the season, how are you to live to glorify God, and how, like Adeline also mentioned, like in any season, that's your main purpose, and it's regardless of your relationship status of how can you still love God and serve God. So I think that was like really cool that it was in that way, and just even hearing from just even other couples in our church, even knowing them and seeing them every week, but hearing their stories and just their testimonies and just how God's been working in their lives was really cool to see.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. How about you, Prudence?
I had a really enjoyable time as well. I guess I have to give the disclaimer that I wasn't there the entire time. So I had to work on Saturday morning, so I didn't end up joining until the second main session on Saturday. And then thankfully I was able to be there the entire time that we had it on Sunday. I thought it was a really unique opportunity for people from like all different walks of life also to come together. So it was really nice to see that there were like young adults, and then there were like the married couples there too, and then people from college, but then that there are also like high schoolers that I see like at Unicoi on Friday nights that were there as well. So I really enjoyed the intergenerational aspect to the conference, and how even though we're all in like such different seasons of life, that there are things that we can like all take away from what we were learning as well, and like apply it to our own lives. Even if they like, there were like younger people at the conference that might not be like thinking about dating anytime soon, but it's still like important to like have these conversations like now and to like learn about these things like sooner. So I thought it was a nice opportunity, and I liked the fact that we extended it even to like the younger generations as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I like that. I really liked seeing the broad spectrum of those who fit under the category of singles. It's not really just an age group, it's like a status, right? And I think what was talked about in this weekend was that it's really just a temporary season for most people, and temporary in the sense that it's earthly too. It's the way that God set up the structure of like our humanity. But yeah, singleness for the glory of God, redeeming it and seeing it not as something to be ashamed about. There's no pressure. You're not a late bloomer. You're not behind. And there is a very needed purpose that God has for us in that season, to learn to be committed, to love Him, and to love the church. So for you guys, what were some of the things that stood out to you as a highlight? And it doesn't have to be like the message. We'll get to that later. Just aspects of the conference that were maybe like a blessing to you personally.
I really enjoyed Glynis's testimony on day 2. It was just so nice to hear from someone who is single and has lived a very fulfilling life, and is living a very fulfilling life, and knowing that, as she said, it's not plan B to be single. You know, God's plan for us to either be married or single is still a good plan. And there's no like variance in how good a plan is. If it's from God and it's good, then that's just what it is. It's good. So that was, I was really blessed by that.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, I really appreciated her perspective, and I found it very refreshing, because I know that like in church, we do say that like, you know, we value like singles, and how like Paul was single, and like Jesus himself was single as well, and how like, yeah, we'll talk about how there are like many blessings that come with like being in a season of singleness, and the things that you're able to do as a single person that you might not be able to do when you're married. But I still think even with those conversations, people that are single in the church can still feel like they're in like a second class category, because I think, and rightly so, that like churches very much like also celebrate like marriage and like family. So I think at times like singles can feel as though they're like, yeah, being left behind, or they're in like a waiting category, or that this is plan B. So I really appreciated hearing the perspective of someone that is choosing a life of singleness, and how she's been able to do so many things for God's kingdom in being a single woman. So I found that really refreshing, and just not necessarily a perspective that you get to hear often. So I thought it was really valuable to have her share with us.
Yeah, very good. Jacey, same or new? Anything new?
It was going to be the same. But I guess just even like the misconceptions and just being able to say that from personal experience, because a lot of times it is talked about, but it is also in a sense where someone hasn't experienced and gone through those things. So it's easier kind of said and done. But just hearing from her perspective and just being able to talk to her, even after that, just hearing a bit more and just, addressing those ideas from that perspective was, encouraging and refreshing too.
So did anything stand out to you specifically in how God spoke to you in the season of singleness, or any take homes that you would like to apply in your life?
I think one of the things that Gabe mentioned in one of his sermons, or at the end of it, was kind of like the time theme throughout all 3 sessions comes down to, do you love God? And just how that's essentially what it's built on. So no amount of knowledge or what you know will, or it's all for nothing if it's not done out of love. And I guess also like from the first session, just how the first session of just how you can still love the church, how you can use that season to glorify God and just bring fruit for his kingdom. Those are things that allow you to even just prepare you for a season of marriage, of like, that's something that you can, even if you're not married, you can still practice love with one another. And that's still what God calls us to do, even if we're not married. So I guess also in the season, like just being able to be faithful and just having time, especially to serve in various ways. I think that's like an application that I was able to take away and just be encouraged and refreshed from, and just being able to use that wisely while I can.
Sorry, this is going to be a follow-up question, but like in this season, do you feel like giving your personal time to the service of the church or ministry that you have committed to, is that something you have to be really intentional with? Because I think that it's very easy to fill that time with other agendas. Some of them might be personal, and like, we're all busy. So how do you make that time to serve the church?
Good question.
Is that like something you desire? Like, did God give you that desire? You know, do you have to like tell yourself this is just the right thing to do, or do you like do it willingly and for the love of, like, you know, FCBC?
Yeah, I guess for me, like I do youth ministry on Friday nights, so I serve on Unicoi. And I remember, so I started serving after I finished grad school. I want to say, actually, no, let me take that back. I actually started serving during my last year of grad school, where things were like still busy, but not as intensive as my first 3 years of grad school. And I remember that it was like a desire that I had on my heart, like even during those first 3 years of grad school, that eventually like I would love to help with the youth ministry, but just trying to be realistic with where I was at, with the busyness, with like didactic learning at first, that I wouldn't be able to have the time to like devote wholeheartedly. And I had experiences in undergrad where I tried to just do too many things when it came to serving, and ended up just being like burnt out and also being bitter. So I didn't want to end up in that same position. So I just wanted to be realistic about my circumstances and not want to end up in that same situation, because I knew that it wouldn't be good for my own heart. And it also, in the end, like even if I were showing up and like serving, that I wouldn't be serving the youth well if I was coming into it with that kind of mindset. So when I started serving, but it was in my mind. And I think I specifically had a heart to want to serve in youth ministry, because I feel like it was when I was in youth ministry that God really reached me through the like counselors that were in my life, and the way in which they walked with me and invested in me when I was at that age. I really like took that with me and really saw how God used those people in my life to really hold fast to me and like yeah, just like keep me in the faith when I was going through really difficult times, like as a youth. And I just, yeah, like held on to that and really remembered that fondly in my own heart and was really thankful for that and saw that as such a tremendous blessing for me. And that was just something that I wanted to be able to do later on as well. So once I like kind of got freed up during my last year of grad school, I was like, okay, I'm like ready to go. I want to like jump in there and serve in youth ministry. I think I learned pretty quickly that there are like a lot of challenges that come with it. Even just from like a physical aspect of like now like going to work and then having like a full week of work and then coming on a Friday night, it is very tiring. And there are times in which like I'll think to myself like, oh man, I'm so tired. And like it'd be nice to just like stay home on my Friday night and get some rest. So I will say that it is, yeah, like I'd be lying if I said like I always went into it like, I'm so excited, like I can't wait to be there on Friday night. Like there are times in which it is like a struggle and like a battle I have to have internally to go in there and to still like serve joyfully. And what I've found that has been profound is that it's during those times where I like going into it think like, oh man, I'm so tired, like that God gives me like supernatural energy and strength to be able to like push through. And not only that, like has blessed me with like wonderful experiences with like the girls that I have in my small group. It's very interesting how that works out. Like it's always those Fridays where I like go into it feeling like so tired that God blesses me with like a unique like interaction that I have like with one of my girls, or just like really meaningful conversation in our small group discussions that I would have missed out on if I weren't there. So God like always ends up like surprising me in those situations, and it's a big blessing when that happens.
Yeah, that's good. That's encouraging. He does give more when we ask, and I think on those particular nights he has some special assignments for you. He'll give you the resources to get the work done. Did anyone else want to share on that question?
I think for me, growing up, my family served a lot. And so kind of following in that model was kind of most of my childhood. And so it was very nice that, my parents would invite me into things, and, it might take longer for them to get a task done, but they wanted to show me the joys of serving and how to serve well.
This is good insight.
So I think at this point, it feels very odd when I don't serve. Like I feel like there's something missing in life. And specifically for me, I really enjoy children's ministry. I think there's something so innocent and curious about them that they really will ask you all sorts of questions about what happened in this Bible story. How come we don't know this? How come this and that? And just like sometimes I'm thinking like, I think I need a pastor to come in and answer this question for you because I don't know the answer. But it's just so much fun to interact with them and showing them how to love one another, how to be kind to one another, how I need to be patient with them. So I think God definitely uses kids to grow my patience. And I think just overall, I think in this season of life, God has been showing me that I sometimes need to take a step back from serving and focus on my relationship with God a little bit more. So even though serving is something I'm very used to, I think God is challenging me more in the quietness and in the stillness to really like turn back to him and see what it is he wants me to do in this stage of life. And if there are things that he wants me to redirect my energy or take a step back from in this season. So I think, just trying to be very sensitive to what God is telling me, while also serving at the same time. So
Yeah, serving is not your identity, Adeline.
Mm-hmm.
Being God's
Yep.
daughter and resting and enjoying him, it's a good season to also soak up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do you want to share anything, Jacey?
I think I wrestled with that same kind of question because growing up, I feel like I served for the majority of my life, and just this year also thinking like, oh, after college ministry, is there a way that I want to serve, or am I serving because I want to serve, and or is it something that because I've been serving that I should continue to serve, and that it's yeah, but I think it's also a wrestle of like, is do I have like time now and should I use it to serve, or um should I use that time like for even just like personal things, and um like yeah, like because Friday nights, I don't know, probably ever since middle school with Gap Unicoi, and then going to Turf every Friday night is um, going to church. And I don't know when I've had like a free Friday night. And I think it also kind of feels weird, like when we have our last Fridays off of not having anything to do, and we're like, oh, we're not at church. But also like I think I was just blessed by my counselors also growing up. Even though my class is very difficult in the way that we're just all very quiet. But being able to see how they just invested in us was something that I wanted to do as well. And just going to retreat with the girls that I am a counselor for Unicoi this year, there was that opportunity, and I think just even seeing or talking to them during retreat just gave me a heart to want to serve them and just love them in that way. And it all worked out, and I also did have time. So I think that's just what drove me to want to serve them and love and care for them. So.
You know, God is really preparing you guys to be shepherds and one day guardians, and it's a very important call to be shepherding the flock. Yeah, it's all a preparation for the next big thing that God is equipping you for. And I'm speaking from experience that all this like experience in ministry with children's and the youth, it is good. What is it? Exposure. It's good exposure to how we pray for people, because you're going to need that in parenting. And yeah, it's just good discipleship work. So I really appreciate you guys sharing. I know that you guys are all serving faithfully, and you know, when God has you step back for a season and to recharge and to refocus, it'll be good too. Okay, so let's talk about the workshops. There were 7 of them. Platonic relationships, real or not. Why get married? 3, singles and the church family. 4, honor our sisters. 5, difficult dating contexts. 6, finding redemption from our past hurts. And 7, what does the Bible have to say about sex?
I remember Gabe mentioning that if he were to have led a workshop, which he didn't really get the opportunity to because it was so busy having to like plan everything, and then also to be like preaching in the main sessions, that he would have done one on how to break up well, which I feel like would have been very interesting to have as a workshop for sure. I'd be curious to know like how that would have gone. Maybe next time if we do this again in like a year or two, I feel like that'd be a really interesting workshop to offer. I went to the one that you led with Darren Leslie, the Finding Redemption from Our Past Hurts. And I had a really blessed time attending that. It definitely was not what I expected it to be, in the sense that I went into it thinking that it was going to be a workshop solely discussing past hurts in the context of like past relationship hurts that we've experienced, but I really appreciated that we talked about different forms of hurt that could come from all different aspects of our lives, such as like family or finances or academics, which I think is a good one to bring up, especially with there being people in like college and like even high schoolers in that workshop as well. And I think it really got me thinking. I think this has been something that I've been like pondering a lot in recent months, or maybe even the past year. I've been thinking a lot about just like past hurts that have come from like different aspects of life, like the ones we talked about in the workshop. And I think attending the workshop was a good encouragement for me to maybe want to work on those more, because I think there have been certain things in my life where I've kind of thought to myself like, oh, maybe I'll just let time heal those wounds. And if I like wait long enough, then like, it'll be fine. But I think the workshop really was a call to like really think through how can we identify these hurts, how can we address them with God's word and from like a biblical perspective, and then how can we find healing. So yeah, that's been something I've been thinking about more, like what can I actively be doing to address different hurts in my life, rather than taking a passive approach of just hoping like time will fix things and then I can just, if I don't think about it, it'll go away eventually.
I went to singleness in the church family, and then also difficult dating context. But I do agree with Prudence. It would have been interesting to hear about how to break up well from Gabe. I would be kind of curious. I've never heard someone want to lead a workshop about breaking up. So that in and of itself was just kind of fascinating to me.
Okay, it'll be specifically requested for next time.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes.
Sounds good. But singleness in the church family, I think was it was a good workshop to kind of refocus on what it means to be single in the church, and how as a single in the church, you're very valued, like just as much as married couples, but also that in a church context, you can still have intimacy with people as a single, and like as sisters in Christ, we can have intimacy as brothers in Christ can have intimacy, and we can just have very deep friendships, and that being married doesn't mean that there's intimacy, but it's something that is kind of that goes even beyond marriage, and just knowing that the church is our spiritual family was also something that was like, oh yeah, like I may be single, but I still have a family. I have people I can lean on, depend on, people that are keeping me accountable. And I think at the end of it, I just really appreciate that PT kind of just reminded us that at the end of the day, we will all be single in heaven. Like there is no marriage in heaven. And so if anything, as singles, we are living out what it's like to be in heaven on earth. So that was a very interesting perspective for me. And then with difficult dating context, I've never heard their story before. And so it was just very interesting to hear all the challenges and literally all the difficult dating contexts. At the beginning of the session, they asked us like, oh, what do you think are some examples of difficult dating contexts? And we brought up like, oh, long distance, age difference. And like, we brought up a couple things and they were like, well, that's everything that we went through too. We were like, oh, wow, you don't normally get them all in one package like that. Okay. Yeah, and so it was just such a blessing to hear from them, and hearing how they shared with us so transparently, and knowing that at the end of the day, they really had to depend on God and really had to rely on God for their relationship to work, and for all the difficulties they faced. It was very much a spiritual test as much as it was like a relationship test too.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's always nice to get to hear the personal story that we don't get to talk about anymore, because you weren't there when it was happening. and just to see God's faithfulness and to see his work come through. All right, Jacey, your turn.
So the first one I went to was why get married. So we talked about like 3 reasons or 3 questions to ask before you do get married. So are you equally yoked? Do you have a track record of solving problems together? And then do you have the same life goals? Which I feel like are pre-engagement questions or questions that you ask at that point. But also it's good to think about early on and just even hearing their story also was just, yeah, nice to hear, just something that you would not hear usually in a normal conversation. And also being able to just see how marriage does reflect the gospel and how that plays out in that context. And then the second one, I also went to yours, Leslie, for finding redemption from our past hurts. And just, I think the main thing that I was able to just even think about was how I think also like how any hurts and anything that has happened in the past that affects someone else in the future, and just even thinking about how God still redeems us from these things, and how we can just it's not even from anything that we do and that can save us, and Christ already sacrificed, and just how we can continue to live faithfully from that.
All right. I think we'll just conclude our time here. And again, thanks for sharing your time to have this discussion. I think it was really exciting. I feel like there was a lot of fruit already from the conversations that you guys were able to have, even on the side during the fellowship and the food time. I hope you guys were able to meet some new faces and some older and some younger. And I think it was just good energy, good momentum to continue spurring on the local church to do God's work here. So thank you, guys.